Hey everybody, welcome to another Edgy live stream. And again, it's amazing the quality of people that pick up my calls every once in a while. And I'm stunned this guy still even remembers me to this day, let alone picks up my calls. And I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by the Illinois High School Football Hall of Fame head coach from Thornton Wildcats for 29 years. Again, 195, 105 overall record, a 6A state title in 1990. And well, damn it, he's just my good friend. And thrilled to bring in Bill Mosel, coming to us from a much nicer, much warmer location down in Florida. And Bill, first of all, as I joked before we came on, we just get better looking as we get older. It's amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Edgy. I appreciate you on. It's we go way back to sitting in the stands at Andrew High School with your brother and Coach Anderson, of course, and that's when we first met. So, always good to talk to
you. We talked as well before we came on about COVID, and Bill, we haven't played football here in over 500 days, and we still are not headed in a good direction. We are supposed to begin practices for spring football in less than 50 days. There's been no movement whatsoever since August. We haven't heard anything since August. Every indication, Bill, is pointing at it's not going to happen here. So my question to you is how in the world were you, and of course you're coaching. Well, first of all, Bill, fill us in on your situation now. I know you're coaching with your son, Billy. He's head coach. Let everybody know where you're at now and what you're doing, and then let's get into the COVID stuff a little bit.
Well, I'm helping my son out. He's the head coach at Riverview High School in Riverview, Florida. I've been with them the last 4 years or since we've been down here. I'm the defensive coordinator. And they hadn't been to the playoffs, Edgy, since 2005. Last 2 years we've been in the state playoffs. This year was a little bit different, given the circumstances, but we were able to get a season in and made it to the first round.
As far as COVID with Florida overall, at Florida high school football, restrictions, how were things different for you compared to maybe the year before? Just kind of paint a little bit of a picture of what you as a coach had to deal with, even to just get things going from a practice standpoint.
Well, I think it was something and I've been coaching almost 40 years. I've never experienced anything like it. It was vastly different than the year before. Right on down to, spacing out the locker rooms, the number of kids that you could have in the locker room at a time. It probably took us about an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 20 minutes right in there to get everybody dressed just to go to practice. And then at the end of practice, you had to reverse that process. So, you spend a lot more time, getting kids ready for practice and then getting kids home from practice. And then you add into the fact that the students had a choice whether they were going to attend school or they're going to do online learning. And if they were online learners, they could still come to practice. So you had kids that were at school and then kids that were coming to campus to practice. And it changed the way you practice, how you structured it, how much time you actually spend on team time. We went so far as to put X's on the sideline so when the kids weren't on the field, at least they were social distanced, when they're off the field. And, putting gaiters on them to make sure they could mask up when they didn't have their helmets on and stuff. So it was a lot different, had to watch them on the sideline during the game and that stuff as far as keeping them apart.
Were you able to pull off the season without any delays? Were there any cancellations? And as far as the team's concerned, any outbreaks at all, or how did things go in general?
Well, I thought we were very fortunate in that we didn't have a single one of our players, get sick. Okay, we lost a couple of kids to contacts in the school, because of, seating arrangements or whatever. Students in the classroom was only 2, so we felt very fortunate. but you had to be really diligent. Now there were some cancellations, around in the county and in the state, but for the most part, we feel very fortunate.
Other sports as well down there, no delays?
They're all going right now, same thing, losing kids on contact or whatever. I think as a coach, the hardest part is you would go to practice and you didn't know if you're going to lose a kid or you're going to lose players, or, you just didn't know. So, the practice was very fluid in that it was always changing. And, we changed the way we did practice maybe 2 or 3 times during the season, as the CDC restrictions changed,
Was it a case of maybe certain teams you would play during the season, you'd see a different lineup than maybe what you guys were expecting? Were other schools maybe impacted a little differently, or was that generally the theme overall? Because I'm assuming you play in a district, right? So it's probably regionalized.
Right. That's correct. Yes.
So
well, you just go ahead. I'm sorry. You go and like you said, you're just not sure who you were going to see, what situation they were in, were they missing players. You saw a lot of younger kids up playing, because you try and fill in that roster of people that you were playing were trying to fill in a roster, So.
Yep. I know you still have plenty of friends up here. I'm sure you've talked to some of your friends that are still in the profession or had been in the profession. What have they been telling you about what's going on with the situation up here? And I'm sure they're kind of, talk to you, maybe looking for some insights and digging into how you guys are able to do things, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bad for everybody involved, especially for the athletes, because, they want to participate. Some of the kids are seniors, and, if you think about baseball and track last year, they lost basketball. Ty had a great team, and he lost his chance maybe to go down state. But, to not be able to compete at all, not only for the players, but for the coaches, we do this because we want to help kids and we enjoy the athletes and that stuff. And, I just think it's unfortunate that they not get to play.
During your career, you've sent hundreds upon hundreds of kids to the college level. And Bill, you dealt with the recruiting process as well as any coach I can remember for all the years I've covered it. But could you ever imagine having a year where you literally had no season, you had seniors that had no tape at all? And I've got to imagine even from the Florida perspective with an NCAA dead period and kids, in most cases, committing to schools and a lot of times hadn't even stepped on a campus. Just absolute crazy times from recruiting as well.
Well, I never thought I'd see that. When you talk to college coaches, there's the uncertainty of who's coming back, who's going to take advantage of having the extra year. What scholarships do they have? They're going to allow them extra scholarships for next year, but in the following year, you got to be back down to your limit. So it's kind of affecting the high schools deeply, and then the fact that they allowed the opening of the transfer portal with no restrictions. So if I transfer, I don't have to sit a year. So you're really affecting 2 classes of kids: the seniors tape, or the seniors that may have tape, and the juniors that follow, because what scholarships are going to be available.
Yeah, I think one of the smart things that the NCAA actually did, and the rumor for a while is that they were considering allowing them to oversign for this class, and I think that would have been an absolute disaster on top of what's already been a disaster with the super seniors or whatever you want to call them getting that extra time. And at least they didn't oversign from this class. If you did that, Bill, I think you're talking the next class or 2 or 3 being impacted overall with numbers. So it's an absolute mess. Here's one for Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What do you miss up here? There's got to be something.
Oh, I miss the people, you know, friends and family, and you know, former players, you know, stay in contact by telephone, but you know, twice a year. You know, able to see people and stuff, and haven't been back since last December. You know, and no telling in the near future when you're going to get back. You know, miss that times the change of seasons, as crazy as that sounds. You know, you miss change of seasons. You know, but mostly miss the people, miss some of the food. You know, and just being around people that you know and love. You know.
Yeah, it's been, again, you just another impact of life where you're just not traveling. People just aren't traveling because of this thing. And again, I'm hoping we're on the right path, and hopefully the vaccines start taking off and start kicking in. But yeah, it's been absolutely crazy. Right. You mentioned former players and keeping up, and I know that's something you've always done a really good job with. One of your former players,
Right.
young man, I remember him, Bill. I remember him. I remember his older brother. Of course, talking about Terrence Jameson, who earlier last week was named the new defensive line coach at Illinois for Brett Bielema. And Bill, fill in the Illini fans about Terrence personality-wise and how he was as a player and how he was as a person as well.
Well, first off, he was a very high character young man, very good student. You know, if you look at Terrence, he's worked his way through that profession. You know, he actually had his career ended because of knee injuries, and was brought on as a student coach, and did that for a couple of years, and then went and coached a year, I believe it was a year at a high school in Madison, then went back to university as a GA, you know, for the coach, and then left there and went to Cal and was a quality control guy. Left Cal, and I believe he ended up at Florida Atlantic for about 3 years. Left there and went to Texas Tech, then to Air Force, then to Purdue, and now at the University of Illinois. So he's a guy that's paid his dues. He's a grinder, you know. He what I would call a grinder. You know, he worked his way through to get to where he is now, and I know that he's very happy. You know.
I remember Terrence, and I remember his older brother Tim as well, as really smart kids academically. You know, they were really good with the grades. Kind of
Right.
quiet off the field from what I remember, kind of soft spoken, but once they got on the field, that football personality came out right away.
Yeah, there were players that understood their difference between being between the lines and how you conduct yourself off the field. You're a gentleman off the field, you're a gentleman in the class. And that you on the field have no place off the field. But very soft-spoken, great parents, tremendous family. You know, Tim is a father. You know, so I just think the University of Illinois is extremely lucky to have him, you know, because he does have roots within, you know, the Chicago area as a familiar name. And, you know, he works hard at what he does.
What advice would you give him, Bill? I mean, God knows you've dealt with enough assistant coaches over the years, and you know, if you can give him any kind of words of advice, what would it be?
Well, you know, just keep working hard and develop relationships with the high school coaches there in the state, and you know, do a great job of that. I think that, you know, a lot of times that's the one thing that recruiters is, you know, developing a relationship with the high school coaches so that, you know, they trust you and you trust them and their recommendations, and they know that if they send you an athlete, you're going to take good care of them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I've tried to stress for a long time. And there's examples. I mean, I'm sure you remember Brian Callahan, who I mean, Callie's just been around forever, recruiting for a lot of different schools, but he was one of those guys that was a familiar face. You knew who he was.
Right.
He come into school. He was a regular, and there were several assistants like that, Bill. And let's face it, when you were at Thornton, you got every level at every possible reach, from the top of the Power Fives all the way down to the D3 schools. It really is important to build that relationship, and an advantage for guys from a recruiting standpoint. I always thought it was.
Yeah, I believe it is, Edge, because at the end of the day, when I'm going to send you, or any high school coach is going to recommend to their athlete, if they ask or the family asks, it's people that you're real familiar with, that you've seen, regardless of the school they're at, they've always stopped by, regardless of whether you had an athlete at their level, couldn't play at their level. At least they stopped by and visited, you were comfortable with them. I always used to get leery of the guys that you saw once every 6 years or whatever. Because you just, again, it's just a trust issue. I'm not speaking any different than any coach, that those athletes are like sons to you. And at the end of the day, you want best for them that you would want for your sons. And so some of that goes back to that trust issue.
It's funny you mentioned athletes that were like sons, and I continue to run into Dontrell Jackson these days. And there was a guy that I know you had a really good relationship, even going back to when he was your quarterback at Thornton. And you see his son ended up committing early to Coastal. And the question I have for you is was Dontrell the father maybe 10, 15 years ahead of his time?
When
you look at
it could have been,
RPO and everything else, that the way the spread offense has evolved. I just think Dontrell would have been one of those guys that you could have seen maybe play at a higher level in the right system.
Well, and in his case, and I go back to, his recruiting, he had some decisions that he had to make, because at that time, the dual threat quarterback, vogue, and so, he had to decide between being a quarterback or being a wide receiver, and what did he want to do with his career. And, he always wanted to be a quarterback. So that kind of limited maybe his recruiting a little bit. Now, in today's era of football, he'd be a valued commodity.
Yep. Yeah. That's what when I see Dontrell all the time, that's what I think is boy, if he would have came along maybe 10, 15 years later than when he did, could have been one of those guys. He had all the ability. I thought he had the arm, he had the legs, he could have done a lot of things in the current offense.
And he had the right personality.
Yeah.
He was a tremendous leader,
How's the family? How's it like coaching for your son?
Well, that's a little different. Sometimes, you chastise a little bit by the head coach, and you're going, man, I remember the day when I used to do that with you. It's different, but it's nice. It really is to, be able to sit back and watch him and see him every day in action, It's really been an enjoyable experience, and every once in a while, if you're asked, you give a little advice,
Yep. Good. Well, again, hope the family continues to do well. It's great to see you. Hoping we get a chance to see you come back north one of these days, and, just keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
I appreciate it, Edge. You.
All right. Bill Mosel joining us from lovely state of Florida.